actually getting the most out of a high-density UPS like the CyberPower OL5KRTHD? If you run a small server rack, a home lab, or a professional audio-visual setup where a single power outage could mean data loss, equipment damage, or a missed deadline, this is the kind of machine that might finally feel worth the price tag. If you're just looking for a modest backup for a desktop or a couple of lights, you'll probably be better off with a cheaper line interactive unit. And yes, the link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started digging into the 5000 VA/5000 W double conversion UPS market, the biggest question on my mind was simple: does the extra wattage actually translate into usable runtime for a real-world load, or am I paying for a headline number that never sees the light of day? The answer, surprisingly, hinges on three things: the type of outlets it offers, how the battery management behaves under daily cycling, and what the LCD actually tells you when you're in the middle of a blackout. The CyberPower OL5KRTHD is a 2U rack-mountable unit that slots neatly into a standard server cabinet, but it also works as a tower if you just stand it on its base. That flexibility is one of the first practical strengths you'll notice. You don't need to rewire a rack to accommodate a massive box. You can simply slide it in, plug your NEM-RAD equipment into the 4 dedicated outlets. 2 L6-20R for 20 amp loads and 2 L6-30R for 30 amp loads, and you're good to go. This layout makes it especially appealing to people who run a mix of high-power devices, a 2 kW network switch, a 1.5 kW server, and perhaps a rack-mountable UPS for a NAS. In those scenarios, the ability to feed both 20 amp and 30 amp appliances without an extra power strip saves both space and the risk of overloading a single outlet. Battery equalization technology is the buzzword that often scares new buyers. In plain English, it means the UPS continuously monitors each cell's charge level and balances them to keep the pack healthy. For a unit that you'll likely run 24/7, that technology reduces the chance of a premature drop-off in runtime. A friend of mine, who runs a small video editing studio, told me that after 6 months of using the equalization feature, his UPS still held about 95% of its advertised load capacity, whereas his older unit had already slipped to 80% after a year. That's a real-world benefit you won't see on the spec sheet. Now, let's talk about the full-color LCD control panel. It's not just a decorative screen, it actually shows you input voltage, battery voltage, load percentage, remaining runtime, and alert messages in real time. In a lab environment where you might be juggling multiple UPSs, having that level of visibility on one unit means you can spot a failing battery or an overload before it becomes a disaster. I've used the panel to confirm that a 2 kW server was pulling 37% of the UPS's capacity, leaving ample headroom for a backup router and a UPS managed switch. The panel even lets you configure shutdown scripts for connected devices, which is a lifesaver for automated server environments. But no product is without trade-offs. The first thing most buyers stumble on is the size and weight. At roughly 54 pounds, the OL5KRTHD isn't something you'll want to move around once it's installed. If you need a portable solution for occasional field work, this isn't the choice. Additionally, the unit's double conversion topology does a stellar job at delivering clean sine wave power, but it also means higher heat generation. In a tightly packed rack without adequate airflow, you may notice the unit's internal temperature climbing into the 80°C range under full load. That's not a failure point, but it does mean you should plan for proper ventilation or a dedicated cooling fan. I've seen a few home lab setups where the UPS was tucked behind a stack of servers, and the system throttled because the rack got too hot. Another practical weakness is the runtime at higher loads. The 5000 VA rating looks impressive, but if you push 4000 W of equipment, the UPS will only give you about 3 to 4 minutes before the battery is depleted. For most data center scenarios, that's sufficient to let you gracefully shut down servers, but it isn't enough if you rely on the UPS to keep a production line running for an extended period. The key is to match your actual load to the UPS's capacity. If you're consistently pulling more than 70% of the rating, You may want to look at a larger battery module or a secondary UPS in parallel. Who should buy the OL5KRTHD? Think of anyone who needs a reliable, high-capacity sine wave backup that can handle a mix of 20 amp and 30 amp loads without the clutter of extra strips. Small to medium data center operators, IT professionals managing a dedicated rack of servers, audio-visual engineers supporting a broadcast console, and serious home lab enthusiasts will find the combination of power density, outlet diversity, and the intelligent LCD panel a genuine productivity booster. The unit also shines for